everybody, and welcome to the FTN Network Schatz and Tanier NFL podcast for Monday, November 13th, 2023, our recap of Week 10 in the NFL. I am Aaron Schatz of the FTN Network. You will find me at ftnfantasy.com/DVOA. He is Mike Tanier of The Messenger, and you will find his work at themessenger.com in the sports section.
Yes.
Make sure you don't look for him in a different section. The sports section is where you'll find him.
My political takes are on fire.
We are here to review Week 10, and let's start by going around the AFC North, because I think the AFC North was the highlight and the headline of this week's contests, especially what happened with Cleveland and Baltimore, because Baltimore, as folks know, was number one in DVOA by a mile going into this week, and certainly looked it in the first half of this game and looked to have a healthy lead on Cleveland, although that was somewhat thanks to a bit of a fluky play, which was the Kyle Hamilton jumping up and grabbing the pass like 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage and then running it in for a touchdown. Cleveland came back in the second half of this game, though. The stats are very interesting for this game. Cleveland had more overall yards, but Baltimore had more yards per play. Cleveland did better, I think, with success rate slightly. I think they were equal in turnovers. The post-game win expectancy formula ended up with the Ravens 56%, which is interesting only in that there were a record 5 games this week where a team won with a last-second field goal.
Okay.
And this was the only one that had reverse post-game win expectancy, and it wasn't really that far in reverse. 56% is, it was basically a 50-50 game. So, Mike, tell me about your feelings about this one and what you feel about the Browns and the Ravens after the Ravens kick away another fourth quarter lead.
It had to be an unbelievably frustrating game for Ravens fans. It's not just kicking away a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter and a 2-touchdown lead earlier in the game. But when you watch the Browns offense, so much of it was Deshaun Watson appearing to be mostly sacked, stumbling away. And we're not talking about like Michael Vicking or Randall Cunninghaming away, but like Gardner Minshewing away, like stumble, waddling and everything, getting out on the run and then completing this pass or finding open space to run and getting 20, 25 yards. Yeah. There was so much of that, and there was so much of the comeback was fueled by that. Throwing in a blocked field goal and some other stuff along the way that Ravens fans have to be looking at it and saying, how did this happen? Oh, and also he fumbled in the fourth quarter on the final drive. Wyatt Teller pounced on it. Like there were so many instances like that for Ravens fans. It's like, how can we be so close?
There were a lot of those both ways, right? Like the Ravens had the advantage of a muffed punt, right? Which is nothing they did.
Right.
That's when the punt returner muffs the punt and they recover it, which is rare.
Right. Well, they did send James Proche from the Ravens to the Browns.
But they did. Then the Greg Newsome pick six was the kind of it's not like Jackson threw it right to him. Like it was batted in the air and came down and Newsome got it. And just because of the way the Ravens were standing at the time on offense, Newsome was able to run it. Like it was not a pick six like, Mac Jones threw a pick six and he just, oh God, what is he doing? It was not like that at all. No. So teams, I think, had the benefits of luck. That's why I definitely feel like this is a 50-50 game. I mean, the Browns played better in the second half, and the Ravens did not look like the team that was number one in DVOA for the whole game and then just won on a bunch of bad luck. Both teams had a lot of weird luck, and it was just a weird game. I come out of it probably feeling better about the Browns than I do badly about the Ravens. Yes. Their defense is still really good, and their offense had their first positive game of the year. And I've watched part of it this morning, and you're right. Like, they kept getting guys open against zone coverage, and then, like, David Njoku would fight for an extra 8 yards.
Right. And the Browns defense really did look that good. In the first drive, the Ravens offense looked really solid. The Ravens got a drive where there was a slant and go by Odell, who he just gets free and outruns everybody. They had the drive that was after the muff punt. Mostly that Browns defense looked very, very, very good. Their special teams looks good. That's the second block field goal they've had this year. The kicker, Hopkins, is kicking everything in sight except for the missed extra point, which was another weird little thing that happened in that game.
Yeah.
The running game looks good. Yeah, Joku looks good. Watson, as he gets up into that almost mediocre place, and he was dreadful in the first half. He puts them in this position now where they can beat just about anybody when everything else is humming.
The Ravens fans are out to get me because they're really upset. They don't want to be number one in DVOA.
Mm-hmm.
They feel like their team is not. And the big thing is the fourth quarter problems, right? So they're 23rd on offense in the fourth quarter compared to fourth overall. And they're fifth on defense compared to second overall. And I went and looked, and this is not a problem they've had in recent years.
Really?
Yes, they've got some blown fourth quarter leads over the last couple of years, but it's not that their offense in particular shuts it down in the fourth quarter.
Right.
So I'm actually going to do a little research before tomorrow's column and figure out from the last 8 or 9 years, like what happens when teams are bad in the fourth quarter on offense in the first half of the year. Does that carry over to the second half of the year? Should Ravens fans be really worried about this, or does this all tend to even out in the long run?
It's got a lot of high leverage plays are involved in that. And of course, there were some high leverage plays yesterday we talked about. I also didn't love Todd Monken's play calling from the second quarter on, where he's having Lamar drop, 7-step drop, deep drop, waiting for things to develop downfield against that defense. It's get your quick game going, get your zone read game going. Jackson had some success with some zone reads. He's dropping back. He's not getting anything open downfield. And the Browns did an excellent job when he was trying to scramble it, basically condensing everything around him so he could not scramble out of the pocket for positive yards. And that's led to some stalled drives.
All right. Reminder, by the way, that if you're watching us live at 11 a.m. Eastern on Mondays and Thursdays, you can make comments or ask questions. We'll take your comments about the AFC North or anything else that's on your mind today. Let's talk about another AFC North game, which was the Texans 30.
Yes.
And the Bengals 27.
Yes.
And so this is outside the AFC North, but related to this Bengals performance. CJ Stroud now leads the league in passing value by DYAR.
Wow.
Josh Allen will pass him tonight unless something weird happens. Although given the quality of the Broncos pass defense this year, he needs to have a good game to pass Stroud. But still, Stroud is last 2 weeks, he has gone from who should we pick for offensive rookie of the year, CJ Stroud or Puka Nacua, to CJ Stroud is an MVP candidate. And this is not a hot take. This is I'm being real here. He is an MVP candidate. No question about it.
And you're looking at a game in which he was without his number one receiver, in Nico Collins. So Noah Brown is out there catching 15 to 25-yard passes several times in this game. And this is when you look at the score, and it's okay, they put up 30. There were a couple of drives. There was one that ended in a fourth down stop near, in the red zone. I think Stroud fumbled, but it was trying to run some kind of gadget play. There was another one where they drove downfield and he got hit as he threw. That leads to a turnover. There were a couple places in this. There was a out of bounds touchdown catch by Robert Woods that could have been a touchdown. It turned into a field goal. The Texans were in position to score about 40 on the Bengals in this game had they executed a little better and a couple things broke their way. I was just choking, by the way, MVP odds. Stroud is still at plus 3,000. So I'm not saying what you're having is a hot take, but he will have to overcome the idea that everyone can just say, let's give him rookie of the year, and then we can go back to talking about Mahomes and Lamar, and that's something that will probably happen when the vote comes around, even if he keeps playing it.
I would honestly advise putting a little money on those odds. I don't do it because since I play a role in the MVP voting, that's unethical, but I can advise you to do it. And Stroud is, he is coming on, man. That plus 3,000 sounds like it is. Those odds are too high right now.
Plus 3,000 is good. And yeah, when you watch him, I have all the BS detectors when a new quarterback rises up, and I put on my BS detectors. The BS detectors are not going off. He is playing in close games against good opponents. He is throwing the ball downfield.
He is getting no help from his running game.
No help from the running game. He does not have elite receivers. The defense is playing pretty well overall, but they're not handing him the ball at the 20-yard line going in or things like that. he's doing this. It's tight window throws. It's downfield throws. It's good poison posture. You see the rookie mistakes. They happen, but he overcomes them. It's everything you could ask for from a rookie quarterback.
Meanwhile, the Bengals are down to 15th in DVOA, and the idea that Joe Burrow was healthy and now they were going to just like raise the league is not happened. They lost this game. Now, I mean, listen, they lost by a last-minute field goal, and like I said on the Twitter, most fans tend to way overestimate the importance of a last-minute field goal victory when it comes to predictive value. Like when it comes to actual wins and losses, obviously that's really important. But when it comes to predictive value, I don't know how much this game said Houston is a lot better than Cincinnati. But given the way that the AFC North is, a win would have been really nice.
It would have been. And, Burrow does throw a ball to Tyler Boyd that like bounces off his hands and chest. That could have been a touchdown late in the fourth quarter. This game could have gone the other way. One thing I noticed when the Bengals were doing their dink and dunk passing game, the Texans defense swarms. The defense, they get off blocks and screens and they make tackles. They don't allow tons of yak. And it's not a lot of big name defenders. It's a lot of guys who are like old journeymen or mid-round picks running around. And that's, to say, part of the D'Amico Ryans factor, I think, kicking in.
Brian Knowles points out it would help if the Bengals could beat an AFC team. They're 1-6 so far. Going back to Houston, by the way, Andrew Daly asks ESPN's QBR. He says, I've never valued QBR much. It has Stroud 10th, but I always thought completion percentage was important. Is Stroud's 61% completion percentage a problem? I would have to look deeper at EPA, and I would have to talk to the ESPN people because QBR is based on EPA. I am surprised that it has Stroud only 10th. That is a surprise to me.
I'm wondering, he had a fourth quarter interception in this last game. Again, I mentioned there were some turnovers. One of the turnovers was kind of a nothing burger because, again, it's 4th and inches and you fumble. I wonder if those things are getting he's getting dinged higher for those things than he would be getting dinged in
right, because for me with DVOA, I see those things as, predictive, but not the timing of those plays is not predictive, right? Okay. Like you were sacked and you fumbled is predictive that you'll get sacked and fumble in the future. Right. It's not necessarily predictive that you'll get sacked and fumble at a specific yard line in a close game in the fourth quarter in the future. Like I feel like EPA overestimates, and EPA tends to overestimate things like fumble recovery. And I don't know what his stats are regarding have his fumbles been returned for a lot of yardage that's not really his fault. It's not his fault if his fumbles are returned for a lot of yardage. So I would have to look closer to know exactly why Stroud is so low. If you look at Houston, I do not feel like Stroud is the 10th best quarterback in the league this year. I feel like it's better than that.
And the thing is, if he's 10th, he's a rookie and he's the 10th best quarterback in the league.
Which is still pretty awesome. Yeah.
Right. So there you go. That's
now
the low end.
Because I said Mike Silver said something about him being the best rookie quarterback since Marino. And I said, I feel like he's better than Marino because he's doing it for the whole year, whereas Marino only did it for half a year. And Mike Silver reminded me, actually, Stroud's only done it for half a year so far. But if Stroud continues like this for the rest of the year, this is the best rookie quarterback season ever.
He reminds me of Roethlisberger as a rookie. The play style and the way he very confidently is zipping. I kept watching these 15, 20-yard passes to kind of no-name receivers. That's the guy he reminded me of.
Andrew Daly says, regarding my first point about EPA valuing timing, it is a little bit like a statistical model that falsely incorporates a clutch gene. Yeah, because of, especially, win probability added in particular incorporates a clutch gene, but EPA also, it's not as much a clutch gene as if you fumble the ball on a sack and then the other team pounces on it, that's treated differently as if you fumble the ball on a sack and your team pounces on it, which is treated differently than if you fumble the ball on the sack and the other team scoop it and runs 80 yards. Right. But all three of those plays, the quarterback essentially did the same thing, which is bad, but it's not differing amounts of bad.
Right.
Like he got sacked and he fumbled. That was the bad thing. The result of what happens to that fumble bouncing around on the ground has nothing to do with
Right. It should not be on
value of what the quarterback is doing.
Yeah, it should not be on his ledger. Yes.
The third AFC North game, Steelers 23, Packers 19. Now the stat has been going around. The Steelers have been outgained in every game, and yet they are 6-3. I will point out that DVOA does not see them as a bad team, despite the fact that they've been outgained in total.
Well, I mean, they're not a bad team, but where's the offense rank these days?
They are 17th on offense,
Ooh.
7th on defense.
Ooh.
They are 12th overall.
Okay.
So people are like, is this the worst 6-3 team we've ever seen? This is nowhere near the worst 6-3 team we've ever seen. Is this the worst 6-3 team of this year? Probably.
Yeah, but how many
the worst 6? Yeah, but I mean, how many 6-3 teams are there, right?
Yeah.
So, the Steelers are surprisingly good. The Steelers are surprisingly good. Like, not based on preseason projections, because based on preseason projections, we thought they would have an average offense. But based on where they were in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, the offense has kind of gotten things together. Canada has, I think, called a better game over the last few weeks. The offense has gotten things together a little better over the last few weeks. And the fact is, they're like 12th. They're 12th in DVOA and 6-3. The Steelers, seriously.
Their offensive line played better in this last game.
Broderick Jones has been really good. The guy that they sniped from the Jets in the draft.
Right. And then didn't play for like the first 6 weeks, if I remember correctly. So they did a real nice job there in this game. And one of the things with the Steelers offense, we have this habit. The Steelers offense, that's the worst offense in the history of the NFL. And then you watch a Jets game. It's like, well, no, that's clearly a worse offense. And you watch a Patriots game. Well, that's clearly a worse offense.
And then you watch a Giants game.
Oh, my God.
Like I was saying yesterday about not to hijack this with Patriots thoughts, but I said on Twitter, like, people who think the Patriots are like the worst team in the league right now are way off. Like, they're garden variety bad, and they just happen to make that look really horrible because they've played such a hard schedule. The adjustments are really strong for the Patriots, but they're nothing like what the Panthers and the Giants are right now. The Giants are a gigantic black hole. I mean, they're terrible.
Right. They're not as much fun to make fun of as the Patriots are, though.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, I totally understand that. I mean, who wants to make fun of the Panthers?
No one.
No one.
The Panthers fans tried to hold a march to protest the season. I don't know what they were marching for, but they couldn't even get the march underway. Their fans can't even get a drive sustained.
Iceman says Seattle is surprisingly worse than Pittsburgh. Not to hijack the AFC North topic, I think what you're seeing there is the difference between the two conferences that we all recognized before the season.
Right.
And the first couple of weeks with things like Detroit being Kansas City, people were like, oh, maybe there is no difference between the conferences. Yeah, there is. There is. If you look at the draft order right now, it's like 9 NFC teams and the Patriots. Right. Like, there is a definite difference between the conferences. So Seattle, like, is a very sure. Oh, he's talking about the worst 6-3 team. Yeah, Seattle is 6-3, and I guess they're slightly below Pittsburgh. They're definitely going to probably definitely be a playoff team, but like pretty assuredly be a playoff team. But yeah, they're not as good as similar AFC teams because the AFC is just the better conference.
You can pretty much write the entire ticket except for the winner of the NFC South right now, assuming the Vikings, and we're going to talk about the Vikings in a minute, keep it up. It's like, well, it's the Cowboys or Eagles, and then it's the Seahawks, and then it's probably the Vikings as your 3 wild cards.
Yeah.
The Lions, Niners, Eagles, Cowboys, and then whichever garbage scow comes out of the Southland Conference.
Which is looking like it'll be the Saints. They're the least garbagey of the garbage scows because their defense is good.
They are, but we got to see if it's the Jameis show now moving forward.
Current AFC North odds. Now, remember, DVOA still has Baltimore number 1. So DVOA loves Baltimore. We have the Ravens winning the division 55% of the time. 94% of the time they make the playoffs, even though they have the second hardest remaining schedule in the league.
Wow.
We have the Browns now winning the division 25% of the time.
Okay.
They make the playoffs 83% of the time and have the 24th hardest remaining schedule. That's a big difference from the rest of the AFC North.
Huh.
Steelers win the division 16% make the playoffs 63% with the number 9 schedule. And the Bengals, even though I have adjusted their rating in the playoff odds for the fact that Burrow is now healthy, only win the division 4% of the time and make the playoffs 13% of the time, partly because they will lose every tiebreaker and partly because they have the hardest remaining schedule in the league.
Yeah, like Brian said, those tiebreakers are turning into a killer. What were the Ravens' odds to win the division again?
I have them at 55%. Like, I have them much better than the market. If you believe in DVOA, you will go out and put bets on the Ravens to win everything.
Except they're only at plus 115 to win the division.
Yeah, probably the Super Bowl bets are probably the ones with the most, where DVOA is compared to the market is the most up on the Ravens.
Right, that would make sense. Plus 475 to win the AFC.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I like that one because I'm a big 49ers believer, so I could definitely see 49ers over the Ravens in the Super Bowl.
Right, and then you cash your check with 2 weeks, and then you go bet something else.
Yeah. Biggest surprises of the week. Your biggest surprise of the week is?
Not so much a surprise, but I'm happy to see him back, and that was Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
Guess it's a miles.
The surprise is, and I think you pointed this out in your messenger column, that a lot of us felt like the Cardinals were all completely building for the future. This was all about Caleb Williams or Drake May. They were going to keep Kyler Murray in bubble wrap. There was no way they were going to risk an injury to him. He would get traded somewhere else in the offseason, and then we would all move on with our lives. And that doesn't seem to be the plan.
No, it doesn't. They had him out there. They had him running the game plan. He looked pretty good. He looked a little bit like the old Kyler Murray. And do you really want Caleb Williams or Drake May over Kyler Murray? Is the separation that great if Murray is healthy and now running a more functional system? He's not running the Cliff Kingsbury system. I would.
Right. Or do you want Kyler Murray with 2 mid-first round picks after you trade down?
Exactly. And it's like Brian likes to say, the mystery box could be anything. It could even be Kyler Murray.
Right.
So,
a taller Kyler Murray.
Which, yeah, again, a taller Kyler Murray, I get that. But, somebody who doesn't have a track record, who hasn't been to Pro Bowls, who hasn't led a weird semi-dysfunctional team, to or toward the playoffs. And it was fun seeing. It wasn't a perfect performance. And I also had to watch the Falcons to watch him, which is always bad. But it was great seeing him out there. But,
my biggest surprise of the week is the Josh Dobbs experience.
Yeah.
Because this was better than last week. He was better this week than last week.
By far.
This was the second best offensive game of the year for Minnesota by DVOA. What is going on? Like, I'm going to hand the floor to you to sort of repeat the good article that you wrote at the Messenger on Friday. I think it was Friday, about Dobbs. But I don't think anybody could have expected this.
Not at all. Not in the least. By the way, I cranked that out on Sunday right after the game because I figured somebody had to put a...
Explain your feelings about what have we learned from the Josh Dobbs experience, because it's good.
Well, a couple of things. One is that teams matter, of course, and these are team victories. Vikings defense is playing well. Hawkinson's playing well. Addison's playing well. The coaches are doing a good job. Another thing is that mobility matters in these backup quarterbacks. And I point out that intelligence also matters. Josh Dobbs is a STEM rock star and a aerospace engineering major, et cetera. But, most third-string quarterbacks are pretty bright individuals. That mobility to come out there and rush for yardage and force the defense to keep a spy in and force them to worry about the zone read when you're in these crisis situations for your offense makes a difference when your alternative is Tommy DeVito or something. And
yeah. And I'll point out, by the way, something kind of obvious, but you mentioned in your column that the problem with talking about intelligence for quarterbacks is that you end up with cookies in your browser for websites you would never want to visit. I will point out that Josh Dobbs helps counter those horrible takes by the fact that he is a brilliant African-American quarterback.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So if you go to such websites, they're probably very confused right now. But
Kevin O'Connell for Coach of the Year. I meant to ask you about this when we were hitting the Texans. There are a lot of really good Coach of the Year candidates right now. I would give you 5 really good Coach of the Year candidates right now. O'Connell, DeMeco Ryans, Dan Campbell, and then less for their overall coaching and more for what their offensive schemes are, Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan.
Okay. I don't like McDaniel in that list because you're getting credit for dropping 70 on bad teams.
Yeah.
Okay. Kyle Shanahan is plus 2,000, which is the market saying we're kind of done with Kyle Shanahan and there's nothing new this year. You hate for it to be that way, but that's how this vote goes. O'Connell is at plus 750. There's a lot of meat on that bone, and I think it's a reasonable pick. But my goodness, what D'Amico Ryans has done, how he has helped nurture Shroud, how he's gotten them in a position where Tank Dell and Robert Woods and Nico and what's his name, Noah Brown are playing, and all these guys on defense that you can't even name, and all these Denzel Perryman types are playing well on defense. I feel like it should be D'Amico Ryans' award, and he's at plus 300 right now.
The other is Dan Campbell because
Yes.
I love Dan Campbell because Dan Campbell is so analytically smart and he wants to bite off your kneecaps.
We should probably go to what proved right thing.
What was proved right this week? Mike, what was proved right for you this week?
This was the first time the Detroit Lions offensive line was really fully healthy. That they really had all the guys that they wanted to have out there. The tackle was hurt for a while, Taylor Decker. Sewell had to split sides. They had problems at center. I think Ragnar was out.
Ragnar was hurt for a couple games, yeah.
A couple of guys at guards. They put those guys out there and ran for 6 million yards against the Chargers. And the rushing yardage total, I think, was 200 rushing yards. You start watching the game, you look at the screens and other almost running plays that the Lions did. There were tons and tons of yak plays where you could see the blocking is making a big difference. Jared Goff was not sacked at all. And just watch a sampling of the Lions highlights in that game and watch where the Chargers defensive line is. And they're moved a couple of yards down the field. It looked like the Cowboys from the 2010s when they had Frederick and Smith and Martin in their prime, and they would just move guys off the ball like you're watching Georgia against Vanderbilt at something. And that was amazing. And I wanted to bring this up because you were here. That probably aided in Dan Campbell's fourth down decisions yesterday. Did you catch some of those?
Yeah, at the end of the game, he went for a 4th and 2 instead of kicking a field goal because it was like, if I kick this field goal, we give the ball back to Herbert with 1.5 minutes left.
Yes.
If you go for it, you kneel on the ball and then you kick your own field goal and the game is over. And that is a smart decision. But you're right. It is a smart decision that is made easier by the fact that he has a strong offensive line.
Also, early in the game, 4th and 5, they ran it up the middle and got it. They ran like
and by the way, the corollary of this is I realize a lot of this is Jimmys and Joes rather than X's and O's. But part of the problem of Brandon Staley is not that he's less aggressive on 4th down than he used to be. It's that he's supposed to be a defensive genius. Their defense sucks, and it has Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, and it still sucks.
It does. It does. And again, they got grinded out in the run yesterday. Their pass defense does not look particularly good. And they never play a complete game. They were actually really good on 4th down yesterday. They had a 4th down and goal. They scored. They had some other plays like that. But it's never optimized across the lineup for Staley.
Super Glucose says that Kyle Shanahan's Coach of the Year candidacy has become meh. You'll go to another NFC Championship game again. Who cares?
Yeah.
I'll point out that I do have to limit comments by Super Glucose as a diabetic. So we can only run a couple of your comments, Super Glucose. I'm sorry, I have to keep my levels of Super Glucose down. But my I was right of the week is San Francisco. Right?
Okay.
My I was right of the week is San Francisco has been super high in DVOA. Mm-hmm. They lost 3 games in a row. Mm-hmm. It happens. I think that there was a feeling that once they got Samuel back and Trent Williams back, and now you add in Chase Young, that defense is going to be better over the second half of the season. San Francisco is good, and San Francisco is going to be good, and San Francisco is a major Super Bowl contender. And by the DVOA playoff odds, San Francisco is the number 1 Super Bowl contender. And I feel like, good for the Jacksonville, the season they've had so far, but San Francisco is a serious team.
Yeah, that was an outclassing, and it was an outclassing from the first quarter to the fourth, and all the things you said were true. And it's like, Williams is back, Debo's back, Chase Young is here, and there was almost from late in the first quarter on, like I got my 4 screens. I'm not looking at that screen anymore. Like there's nothing happening here.
Yeah, I switched away from that game to Pittsburgh, Green Bay at a certain point. Yeah.
I wish I could have switched away from the Cowboys game too, but I was in my home office. So
DVOA's top 10. Here we go. We're going to count them up. 10th, Jacksonville, dropping 4 spots.
Okay.
Number 9, bye week, Philadelphia. We've talked about this in the past. We feel Philadelphia should be higher. Okay. 8th, Miami, also on the bye week.
A lot of
passed by the new number 7, Cleveland.
Believable.
And passed by the new number 6, Dallas.
Okay.
Which, guts and stomps, right? It's looking at the fact that they have clobbered the Giants twice. And it loves that they've clobbered the Giants twice. And it probably has Dallas a little high because they just specifically have clobbered the Giants twice. Speaking of teams that didn't clobber the Giants, but clobbered other opponents, again, Buffalo, we'll talk about them in a second. Buffalo with a big red downward arrow. Right, because they haven't been as good over the last month. Number 4, Detroit.
Nice. Yeah.
Number 3, dropping a spot on their bye week, Kansas City.
Okay.
Because they were passed by number 2, San Francisco.
Okay. All right.
Which makes sense when they whack the hell out of Jacksonville.
Yes. And
Iceman points out that Shanahan has a Mahomes for MVP problem. Yeah. Where some voters are just bored of their excellence.
Right. But Mahomes is not having an outstanding season. And Shanahan wasn't up until this game, because when you talk about coaching and you say, okay, one of your weapons is gone and, your left tackle is gone, what are you going to do? And you say, well, we're going to lose 3 straight games. That's not a good argument for the coach. The coach is like, no, we manufactured a win or 2 in there. So,
and number 1 still, and, I'm sure I'm going to have to talk to people about this because the DVOA measures an entire season. It doesn't just measure the last week, is Baltimore. Baltimore, because, again, they've played 4 games against top teams. They lost 1 of them by 2 points this week. The other 3 were dominations.
Right.
So they are still number 1 in DVOA. Yes. All the things Ravens fans don't want to hear from me are the Ravens still one of the top teams ever? Yes. Are they the best 7-3 team ever? Yes. I'm still a big believer in the Ravens. You put a gun to my head. You said, who's going to win the Super Bowl? My answer is the San Francisco 49ers. Mm-hmm. And I might have to say Kansas City would be favored over them to win the AFC. But if they're not the best team in the AFC, they're the second best team in the AFC. And if they're not the best team in the NFL, they're like one of the 3 best teams in the NFL. So I'm still a believer in the Baltimore Ravens.
Ravens ranked 32nd in the league in the last 6 minutes before halftime. And they're great everywhere else.
Somebody put up a stat yesterday. I retweeted this. It was from NFL Research. The amount of time that a team has been behind in its first 10 games.
Okay.
The Ravens are the 3rd lowest amount of time being behind in their first 10 games in the last 40 years. The other 4 teams in the top 5 were 10-0.
Wow.
And the Ravens are 7-3.
They find a way to keep opponents in the game. It is very
right. The question about the Ravens is that predictive? That's the hard question. Is that predictive? Because there's no question it's happened.
And it's a hard question to answer in a conference where the Bills have these trip over themselves tendencies, and the Bengals have them, and now the
Chargers have them.
The Chargers have them.
And so imagine if those teams are all playing each other,
right?
And then they just trip over each other in the 4th quarter to continue to give each other back the lead,
and the Steelers win,
and the Chiefs win.
Yeah. The Steelers beat them on the way to losing to the Chiefs.
But by the way, Super Glucose, I'm kidding. I'm not going to not pick your comments just because of your name.
But that's why.
Monday Night Football, Broncos +7 at the Bills. Bills are 5th in DVOA. Broncos are 26th, but of course, Bills are on the way down. Broncos are on the way up. So the question is, does this game look more like the last 3 or 4 weeks, in which case these teams are a lot closer, and I think your pick should be Broncos +7.
Right.
Or does this game sort of set us back to where the Bills were in the first half of the season, at least offensively?
Right.
And where the Broncos were in the first half of the season defensively, in which case Bills -7 should be the pick.
Right. And I don't have an answer to that right now. That 7-point spread, I don't like it. I would like to have the Bills at about 5.5. That would be a little more comfortable to take the Bills in this game. But the Broncos are the team I have a hard time gauging those last couple weeks before the bye and before the trade deadline, how much of that was a real growth on the part of the team and how much of it was some of these guys like Jerry Jeudy saying, I don't want to get traded. I'm going to take things up a notch at this point.
I agree with you that I think the line is straight on.
Yeah.
If I was going to put money on this game,
okay,
it would be Dalton Kincaid over.
Oh, wow.
I think it's 52.5. And
Okay.
he's been over 52.5 in every game since Knox got hurt. And the
Mhm.
Broncos are 26th against tight ends this year and allows something like 70 yards a game to opposing tight ends.
They do use them a lot. I won on a over prop with Kincaid a couple weeks back. So that's it. I like that play a lot.
So I like Kincaid over 52.5 is a better bet than trying to bet either the spread or the total on the game itself.
I love it. Do it.
All right. That does it for our Week 10 review podcast for November 13th. Again, he's Mike Tanier, themessenger.com. I'm Aaron Schatz, ftnfantasy.com/DVOA. Be back here Thursday at 11 a.m. on YouTube to talk to us live about Week 11, or, of course, listen on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to rate us and tell your friends and spread the word about our podcast and live stream. That does it for today. Everybody enjoy Monday Night Football, and we will talk to you on Thursday. So long, everyone.